Hi, I'm David from over at simplymaya.com, and we get asked quite a bit how you render a movie out of Maya. So how you go from still frames to a movie you can throw on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you might need it, show it to a friend. Now I did a video on this a couple of years ago, and the process has been updated a bit since the release of Arnold and Maya 2017, so I'm going to do this again. This video is if you're new to Maya, or if you've just started experimenting with animations or simple turntables and you're a bit unsure how to get that sequence of images from Maya into a third-party application, or indeed I will show you now how to build a video and something suitable for you to upload. So I'm going to be using my little Lego cars here. It's a tutorial I've just finished and I happen to have handy, but I don't have any animation on it. I don't have anything to render, because I thought we'd take just a minute here. For the people who don't know, Maya has a built-in turntable system in it, and I thought I'd just give you a few tips on using that. Then we'll look at rendering out the sequence of images and how you set that up. Then we'll look at putting them back together to get them in a state where you can upload them, share them with friends, things like that. So for a start, if you go from rendering here to animation and hit visualize, you'll see we do have a create turntable function. The problem with this function is it will tend to orbit around whatever you have selected. So if I had this Lego brick selected, let's say, and go to visualize, create turntable, we'll pop its options. I'm using 120 frames. If you want to use the same, just come down here, type 120 and your timeline will correspond, change accordingly, and you can set the number of frames here, clockwise, counterclockwise. So if we leave it on clockwise and hit turntable, bearing in mind we have this brick selected, and then we hit turntable, yeah, we've gone a bit not quite where we wanted to. So it can be quite difficult to get one of these turntables to go where you want if you're not used to it. You could try picking part of your car and think, okay, I'll orbit around this, but it might not be in the center. So a little tip for you if you've never done this before: make sure you're on the perspective view, because once you're in a turntable camera view, you will not be able to move or pan around it. The camera becomes locked into that turntable. So go back, perspective, perspective, panels, perspective, perspective, and now you'll be able to move around again. Alright, so we want a central focus point here, but we can't add a piece of geometry to the scene. That would get into our render, so we have create a locator. And these are nice handy things useful for all sorts of different tricks in Maya. But in this case, if we wanted to sort of orbit around the center of our two cars here, I can move that locator, make sure I have that selected, get a good start point for my animation, and just go back to visualize, create turntable, pop its options, 120 frames, turntable, and this time I'll pirouette around that locator. For those of you who don't know, a locator won't show up on a render, so you can have as many as you want doing different jobs without actually affecting the final visual look of your animation. So that gives us 120 frames we need to get out of Maya and then into something else to work with them. So if we pop our render options here, you'll notice if I go down to frame range, I can't set anything, and that's because the frame animation extension is set to name single frame. So generally the way you'd want this set for animation is name, number, extension. So the name of the file you're saving out, the number, and the extension. Now that brings up frame range, so we can put 120 in here. We can also now select our image format. Now this is an important one. If you intend to take this sequence into Nuke or maybe After Effects, and you have render layers on it or channels that you need to come through with the render, then EXR is probably the best format. If you intend just to take this sequence of image Maya creates, throw them in a program and make a video to go straight to YouTube, then EXR is going to be too much. You don't need a 32-bit image for that. So if you're going to be post-processing the image, if you're going to be bringing it into After Effects or Nuke, then you want to stick with EXR. If you're just doing a quick test render to show a friend or a colleague, then you can get away with an 8-bit image straight out of Maya. A PNG would be fine. Make sure you have the gamma at 2.2. If you have it at 1, you'll save out an uncolor managed image, which would be the case if you were saving out a 32-bit image, but that's a bit of a different scenario altogether. So I'm going to go on the principle here that you're just trying to create a video to share with some friends, and you're not going to do any hardcore editing on it, in which case an 8-bit PNG is kind of perfect for that. So frame padding. It's currently set at 4, and this will deal with how the numbers are padded. So at the moment it would be name, which is here, so it would be called turntable render .0001, because it has a padding of 4. Padding of 5 would make it 00001, and so on and so forth. Now, by default, most applications won't open files if they're just named 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, because that sequence would actually be 1, 10, 2 if you sorted it in an order on most third-party programs. So you have to have some frame padding. The amount of frame padding you need depends on the number of frames you're going to get to. So we could deal with a frame padding of 3, because we're only doing 120 frames, so that would allow us 999 frames before our padding became an issue. With 4 we get 9,999. The default is 4. I normally leave it. I don't think in the last 18 years I have ever rendered more than 9,000 frames in one hit. So generally, if you're rendering an animation that big, you'd split it up into multiple camera angles and different render sessions anyway. So 4, generally you're absolutely fine. Now you need to select a camera, and in our case that would be turntable camera 2. If you forget this, what you'll end up doing is rendering the perspective view, which generally isn't animated a lot of the time. You'd normally use a separate camera to animate on, the same way we use this turntable camera. So you'll go off, go out, go to bed to wait for your render to finish, and you'll wake up in the morning only to discover you've rendered 120 copies of the same picture. That's generally, in my experience, where the keyboard goes out the window. So make sure whatever you do, you don't forget which camera you're rendering, because it just leads to much frustration. So once you've got all this set up, I'm not going to go into the Arnold quality settings. I'll save that for a different lesson. In fact, we've got plenty of lessons for Arnold AOVs and quality settings on Simply Maya. You might want to go check that out if you want to take a look at some of the stuff we've got here. I'm just going to assume for this we're going to get some nice simple images out. So once you've done this, made sure your frame range is okay, made sure you've given this a name you like. In this case I'm going to call it V2, so I can separate it from the one I did the other day, and we're good to go. We've got the right number of frames, we've got the right camera, most important, we've got a simple 8-bit image format which will allow us to quickly turn this into a video capable of being uploaded to a video aggregation site, YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, whatever you need. And we've got all our basic settings. So now we need to render the actual sequence of images itself. But before we do that, you want to make sure you have a project directory set up if you don't already, because Maya will need to know where to save these pictures. So you don't want Maya saving out hundreds of images all over your hard drive wherever it feels like it, or even worse, dumping them in the system temporary folder. You come back, restart the machine because it's a bit low and not slow, and all your renders disappear out the temp directory. You want to make sure Maya knows where to save your images. So you need to go to File, Project Window, just hit New. I already have one, so I'm not going to, but hit New, give it a name, give it a location, and hit Accept. Maya will then create all these subdirectories for you under the current project name. So in our case, images will be saved, funnily enough, in the images directory. So my network drive, Lego car render tutorial, images, which is where my final renders will be stored. Yours will be stored, whichever name you give this, of course. So, having done that, you need to set this menu up to rendering, go to render, and render sequence. Now, batch render will work if you're on an old Mental Ray plugin, or you're on an earlier version of Maya. If you're on Maya 2016, then just hit batch render. Unfortunately, because Arnold comes with a limited license in Maya 2017, you cannot batch render in Arnold, which is sort of the point of this tutorial. What you can do is render an image sequence. So we pop the options for that. And if you're wondering what the difference is, batch rendering allows you to do more complicated rendering processes. So you can farm it out to a network, you can do all sorts of different things in a batch render. An image sequence is literally the same as you going on frame 0, hitting render, going file save, taking it to number 2, render, file save, number 3, render, file save. So a image sequence is just basically a batch of that action. So Maya will render the image, move the frame 1, save the image, render the image, move the frame 1, save the image, and so on and so forth. So to activate that, just hit render sequence, and you'll see my render view pops up. Now this picture here looks washed out because it's been gamma corrected twice, but that won't happen to you. This was just one I loaded in as an example. So you can see here, Maya has started rendering my frame, the same as it would if I just manually clicked on render. You can also see down here that Maya is saving my frame in Lego car render tutorial, which is where we told it, images, it will save it in a temporary directory, that's fine, but it saves it within a temporary directory within images, so that directory won't disappear, and it's called it turntable render v2.0001.png. So what will happen now is this frame will render, Maya will automatically move on to the next frame, render it and save it, and in the end you'll end up with a directory full of images. So I'm going to let this render, and I'll see you in a minute when I'll give you, one simple way to get this frame sequence to a movie for uploading. Okay, there we go. Through the magic of the internet, I have rendered out 120 frames. As you can see, it's just the basic turntable. We'll open these up in a moment, but we need a way now to turn these frames from frames into some sort of video. Now, there are many ways to do this. As I said, if you were doing proper post-production on it, you might take it into Nuke, you might take it into After Effects. If you just, however, want to take these frames, save them out as a movie, I would definitely recommend a program called Virtual Dub. It's been around for many years. I've been using it for about 15 years now, I think, and it's very good at what it does. It's free and it's very easy to use. Basically, there's lots and lots of tutorials on it on the net on how to encode things like X264 and all of these formats that are great for sharing video. I'm not going to go into that too much. Just know that I will put the website, the link here for this website in the video description, so you guys can go and get it and check it out. I'm going to open my copy and run you through quickly one simple way to do it, and we'll then have a video that we could share. So grab this. You don't need to install it even, you just unzip it and double click the virtualdub.exe file and you're off to go. Okay, so here is Virtual Dub open. As I said, it's very simple, it's free, it's fast to download. I really can't recommend it highly enough. So I'm going to click open here, and you'll see that I am in the right directory, and I have ticked on here automatically load linked segments. This way it will load these in as a sequence of images. There it goes, and it's done. So I can hit play, and you'll see it plays back that turntable. Now you'll have to excuse the lighting on this. The lighting scenario for this was never designed for a turntable, it was designed for a still shot, but I think that illustrates the point that with just a tiny bit of work we can get that render out, we can get that sequence out, and indeed we can even get a turntable done very easily. Now we need to turn this into some sort of usable, useful video. So for a start there'll be no audio. If you want to have audio, you can of course, here go source audio, audio from other files. So you can load in an MP3 or whatever you want here as a background track, a bit of music or whatever you want. I'm not going to go into this in its entirety, of course. Video encoding is a quite broad and complex subject. We're just going to cover the very basics. So let's say we just want to get this into some sort of usable format. So let's get a video and set a frame rate. Now because this is an image sequence, we can set any frame rate we want. It doesn't have an inbuilt internal frame rate, so it could be 60 frames a second, 25, 50, 40, doesn't matter, it's up to you. I'm going to change the FPS to I don't know, let's just say 15 frames a second because there's not many frames here and I want to slow it down a bit. More common one would be 24, 30, you know, even 40. So depending on what quality you need, how smooth you want it, set your frame rate accordingly. Just click OK. Now the video at the moment is on full processing mode, which means it's going to process the video when we click save. But that's fine, that's what we want. If it wasn't on full processing mode, we'd simply save out another image sequence, which is not what we want. So to save out simple raw AVI, which would be absolutely massive, so I wouldn't recommend it, on a video like this, you'd be talking a few hundred megs, you know, for a 5-second video, depending on what you have the frame rate set, of course. But if you did want a raw AVI, uncompressed, untouched from the original images because you were going to edit it later on, now you can just go save AVI. So that will allow you to save out an AVI, and that will be huge. You can see one I saved out here. This is actually opened the last time I used this program. So that's about a 5-second video clip, and it's 337 meg. So it's huge, as will this one be. So that might not always be the best. Now the reason I've got such a large video file is because I was taking that to another video editing program where I then compressed it. So you don't want to compress things twice. So if you are moving on to another video editing program, where perhaps you want to put some infographics in and, you know, some nice fades in and fades out, things like Adobe Premiere, then you're going to want the uncompressed. If you just want to bung it on YouTube, you probably don't want to be uploading, you know, 500 gigs, unless you're sitting on a 100 meg line, in which case go for it. But even so, you're going to want some form of compression on this. So I'm going to pick a really simple one. I'm just going to go here up to video. Now I've got my frame range set. So under compression, whoops, that was the wrong button, excuse me. Under compression, you'll see I have various different compression options on this machine. Now, if you want to encode something like H.264 or H.265, which are very modern standards, you can go look that up on the internet. Plenty of forums, plenty of way to do it. But I'm going to just use Windows Media Video 9. It's not a particularly impressive method of compression, but it's good enough for, you know, getting your files on YouTube or something. So I'm going to set my coder complexity to complex. I'm going to whack that up to better quality, and I'm going to set my quality level to say 90, because in this case I'm not too worried about the size of the final file. This will probably turn out to be about 3 or 4 meg, which is absolutely fine for me to upload. I just don't want that 400-500 meg file. So we'll leave the one pass variable bitrate armed, and we'll just click OK and OK again, and then it's save AVI. We're going to save a Windows Media Video, so WMV, although you can also give that the extension AVI if you want. It really doesn't matter. So we'll just save that. AVI is just a container format for video codec and audio codec, so Windows Media Video codecs will fit into an AVI, as will MP3. So AVI as a file extension will be fine, and you can see the quality of rendering I got from Maya was quite bad. It was simply done as an illustrative purpose for this video, and I really didn't want to wait 15 minutes per frame for 120 frames to bring this to you guys. So there you can see, as you can see, VDub, Virtual Dub, got through that in no time at all, a couple of seconds. So I'll open up the final video file so we can have a quick look at it, and I'll let you know what size it is. Okay, so here is where the final video went on my hard drive, turntable render 0001.avi, of course you can rename that, and it's 3.5 meg, so very, very suitable for uploading. You know, it's going to take you no time to upload. If I just click play, that'll play that back. It's just standard HD 540, I think. I seem to remember I set it at. But yeah, so now you can take this and whack it on your YouTube, whack it on your Vimeo, you know, or do whatever else you need with it. And bear in mind that if you had here EXRs with render passes and whatnot, the way to get them out is still the same. You would still use render image sequence, a render sequence here. So even if you were dealing with EXRs or 32-bit images, you would just need to then take them into another program like Nuke or After Effects, because Virtual Dub isn't going to be dealing with multi-channel EXRs. I mean, it's a nice, cheap, free program for doing simple stuff. So if you want to go down that road, which I definitely suggest you do at some point, then grab a copy of Nuke, grab a copy of After Effects, whatever you're comfortable with. But the process remains the same. So the process from going for a render in Maya to an image sequence in Maya remains the same. What you do with that image sequence afterwards, and what information you decide to take out of Maya, 32 bits, do you need AOV, render passes and whatnot, that's down to you. But if you just want to render a sequence and chuck it on the internet, there's a good way to do it. Alright, so thanks for watching. You can find more information down below, where I will leave the link to Virtual Dub and the link back to our website, Simply Maya. Thank you.